Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. It was on this date, the 24th of April, in the year 1920, that the mother arrived in Pondicherry for the second and the final time, not to leave it for even a single day till she left her body in 1973. And one can consider the 24th of April to be a sort of a foundation-laying ceremony of a new world order. Because over the 53 years that she stayed here, she and Sri Aurobindo worked towards their goal, their mission, which was in common. The goal was to create a new type of world, a world free from misery and suffering, by going to the very roots of that misery and suffering, which is basically the level of human consciousness. So their goal was to raise the level of human consciousness so that human nature would change, so that human beings will behave much better. And once they behave much better, which means they act out of love, which is a uniting force, rather than out of the ego, which is a separative force. Once they start acting out of love, the world will automatically become a much better place, because that is at the very root of all cruelty, misery, suffering, and injustice in the world. Instead of talking about the historical details around the date, that is 24th of April 1920, I thought we will spend this morning to talk more about things which may be of greater practical value to most of us. And that is some simple pieces of advice that the mother has given to spiritual seekers. And this advice is based primarily in terms of the goal of each individual seeker. You might say that we are talking of a yoga which is collective in nature, which seeks to transform the world. Then why the focus on the individual? The focus on the individual is because the individual is the unit of the collective. If individuals change, the world changes. Secondly, when it comes to the spiritual path, each individual can primarily take care of his own spiritual growth. You cannot take the responsibility of the spiritual growth of even your near and dear ones, even the ones who are extremely close to you, like your spouse or your children, and so on and so forth. You cannot take that responsibility. This is an individual journey, and therefore the focus on the individual, what the individual can do in terms of the goal of the spiritual path. Now, what is the goal? There are many ways of looking at it, but the way in which the mother has looked at it while giving this advice is in terms of the discovery of our psychic being. Our psychic being is our divine essence, sometimes also called the soul. There will be no terrible mistake you will be making if you equate the psychic being with the soul. However, there is a shade of a difference. While the soul is taken as an inert entity, as something that is there to give us the consolation that at least some bit of us will continue to live even after we are dead and gone, but that is not what all the soul is about. The soul also has a dynamic aspect which participates in day-to-day life and has at least three functions. One is to provide us guidance. This is the most important function. Guidance about what to do, especially when we are faced with choices, what is the right thing to do. The second function is to give us knowledge. Knowledge which is not accessible to the ordinary mind. The psychic being is a part of the divine essence, and therefore it has access to those levels of consciousness which are not accessible to the mind. The third function is to enhance our capacity, enhance our capabilities in every respect, enhance the capabilities of our instruments. The instruments are basically the body and the mind. And how can they be enhanced? Because once the body and the mind start working in light of this divine essence, the ordinary limitations of the body and the mind tend to disappear. We can exceed ourselves. We can go far beyond what we think we are capable of. And some of you who have been involved in something creative, be it drawing a painting or writing a poem, would have realized that there are some special moments of inspiration, where you feel that it's just your hand that is moving, but as if the way the hand should move is being guided from somewhere else, from a higher force. You are in a state of ecstasy, and at the end you have created a product which you yourself start doubting whether you were capable of, and especially if you see that same painting or poem or piece of literature 10 years later, you start wondering, did I really do it? That happened because you could self-exceed because of this force flowing into you from this mysterious entity which we call the divine. So the advice is based on the discovery of this entity. To believe in it at a mental level is important. It is even necessary, but not sufficient. Why I'm saying it is necessary is because that is how most of us start. We trust those who say that, yes, we are not just the body and the mind, we also have a soul. We trust them, and therefore we believe in it. That is how we begin. To us, the soul may not be a real entity. We may not have a true experience of it, but we trust them. And unless we trust them and have this mental belief, we will not be able to discover it. So it's necessary, but it is not sufficient. Why it is not sufficient is because you may believe in it, but you will not be able to organize your life around it unless you have experienced at least some glimpses of it. So that experience is important, your personal experience is important, and that is what the sadhana is about. And this personal experience is not a one-time event. It is a long journey, and it happens in steps. There's a long preparation involved. Initially, one may not even be aware of this greater awareness of this hidden entity, and therefore it may appear sudden, but it is never sudden. It comes after a long preparation, a preparation in this life, and also preparation which has been going on in previous lives. So it needs long preparation, but it's a journey which is in itself enjoyable. So the journey is long, but enjoyable, and that's what makes it worthwhile. So the mother has given this advice for this discovery, and that is the goal. So the first thing important is that we should be seeking it. That is, we should have the aspiration. We should be looking for it. Unless that intense aspiration which is perseverant, aspiration which is intense but not impatient. Unless that is there, this discovery cannot happen. The second thing she says, which is again based on this belief of the hidden entity, the divine, not only in us, but in all creation. Because, if we feel that I am not just the body and the mind, I also have a soul, so does everybody else have. And not only that, in those of us who have grown up in the Vedantic tradition in this country, have it in their blood. That the divine is there not only in each one of us, but also in every animal, every plant, and even in inanimate things like the stone. So, the second piece of advice the mother gives is, seek this hidden entity and then decentralize. Now, what does this decentralization mean? If suppose you start meditating on this belief of yours that the divine is everywhere, then naturally you are thinking of the divine in the people who are sitting next to you in the meditation hall. You start seeing the divine in the walls of the meditation hall, in the plants which are seen through the glass in the meditation hall. You start seeing all that. But then you are putting yourself at the center. As if the divine is in you, and then around that you are seeing that the divine is there everywhere. Now this is again a carryover of that exclusive attention to oneself. That is what the ego is about, and that has not disappeared. You have started seeing the divine in everything based on this mental belief, but still you are yourself at the center of it. Now, the mother says decentralize, which means that imagine whatever you are seeing, say in this meditative state, while you are trying to meditate, like a vast canvas, and see on it a very large number of dots. And some of these dots are inanimate things, some are animate, some are animals, some are plants, some are human beings. So each one is represented by just one dot on this vast canvas, and visualize yourself as just one of these dots. Which means that take that feeling that I am somebody unique, I am something special, I am separate from everybody else. Try to get rid of that. That is decentralization. Now, this is very general advice and looks also rather complex, because to jump from the way we are ordinarily constituted to this sort of a decentralization is something which can give us an ecstatic experience maybe during meditation, even if we get a glimpse of this type of decentralization, but still we may not be able to organize our life around it. Still, the moment you come out of the meditation, you say that my needs are more important, I am thirsty and therefore I want water. You don't care whether the person next to you is even more thirsty. You may forget that. Or I have a common cold, so my common cold is very important, I should take care of it. You forget that the person next to me might be having cancer, which is even more terrible. So you pay more attention to your common cold than to the cancer in the next person. So in spite of this image of decentralization, this sort of a exclusive attention to the self will remain. And therefore, it's a long journey to move from there to that discovery and organizing one's life around it. So the mother has given also some specific pieces of advice. And some of you might be familiar with that book. I'll tell you where I discovered this. Some of you might be familiar with a beautiful compilation of about 150 pages, not a fat compilation. The title is Sri Aurobindo and the Mother on Education. In this, on page 124, the mother starts talking about it, and by 126, this advice is almost over. Just about 3 pages. All this advice is contained in those 3. So it's very succinct and yet very useful. So we'll go over this advice. The first piece of advice is, the mind is incapable of judging spiritual things. Spiritual things are about something higher than the mind. How can something that is lower judge something that is much above it? Yet we appoint ourselves the judge. Sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. Negatively, extreme would be, I don't see God and therefore God doesn't exist. But then what is it that makes me see? We forget that force. The force that makes me see is the one who has decided what I will be able to see and what I will not be able to see, and therefore there may be something that I cannot see, and that in fact may be more important, a more fundamental reality than what I can see. He makes me see what is essential for my survival. The way every animal uses his senses to be able to survive. But I can't use these eyes as a judge for what exists. They can give me the limits of what I can see, but they cannot give me the limits of what all exists. So sometimes we judge negatively. Sometimes we also judge positively. For example, you may judge me. This person is talking of all these high-flown things, so he must have discovered his soul. He must have made that discovery which the mother has talked about. Don't judge me that way. I may not have. Somebody who gives you a beautiful PowerPoint presentation on the Everest might have collected all those beautiful pictures from Google and is giving you a beautiful PowerPoint presentation, and based on the beauty of these is giving you a beautiful description of the Mount Everest because he has a good command over the English language. He might have even composed a poem on the Everest, but leave aside the Everest, he may not be capable of even climbing a hill. And yet he can do it. So I may be describing all this, but I may not have the experience. I do not have. So don't judge even positively based on the mind. So it is your mind that is deceiving you, making you feel that I might have made the discovery when I haven't. So the mind is incapable of judging spiritual things. Then the mother says something very interesting. She says that this is something which in principle everybody accepts, but hardly anybody really acts upon. So, the title itself of the session was Simple Advice That Is Not Easy to Act Upon. So the advice is very simple, even this piece of advice. Don't judge spiritual things with your mind. but very difficult to act upon, and that's what the mother says. Hardly anybody is able to put this advice into practice. Leave aside judging, even understanding. Spiritual things can't even be understood at the mental level. Everybody understands it, yet how much time, how many of us waste just trying to ask, yes, I know it is not very important to understand with the mind, but then just tell me, the Upanishads talk about the Brahman, the Gita talks about the Purushottam. What is the difference between Purushottam and Brahman? Okay, then why do we say, if Brahman is everything, why do we say it has two aspects, Shara Brahman and Akshar Brahman? If the Kshara Brahman is the manifestation is the function of Prakriti, then what is the difference between Purusha and Prakriti? If the divine everywhere is the Atman, then what is the difference between Atman and Jivatman? Complete waste of time. Total waste of time to get into these arguments. Don't try to understand spiritual facts at a mental level. First, most important piece of advice. This is the most important piece of advice. And yet, how much time we waste just on this sort of things. Second, give up all personal seeking for comfort, satisfaction, enjoyment, or happiness. Now, again, this can be misinterpreted if you just miss one word, seeking. What the mother is saying, give up all personal seeking. Firstly, it has to be total, all. Then, give up all personal seeking for comfort, satisfaction, enjoyment, or happiness. Now, what are these? Comfort is primarily physical, satisfaction is primarily mental, enjoyment and happiness are primarily vital or emotional. So, these physical, vital, and mental pleasures, she's not saying that don't enjoy them. Don't enjoy them if you have them. She's not saying that keep away from all comfort. She should not be physically comfortable, if possible, lie down on a bed of nails. She's not saying that. Or if you are getting satisfaction from your mental work, give up that satisfaction. Do it without getting that satisfaction. She's not saying any of these things. Give up all personal seeking. Don't seek it. Which means do not go after it. Do not occupy your mind with getting more and more of it. This seeking has to be given up completely, all. And then personal, which means you can seek this physical comfort, mental satisfaction, or happiness for somebody else. That you can do. In that there's no problem. Okay? So, all these words, all personal seeking, all are important. All this giving up has to be total, personal, it has to be in relation to yourself, and seeking, don't long for it, don't yearn for it, but if you have it, you can enjoy it. As the Upanishad says, Isha Upanishad in the very first verse, Tena tyaktena bhunjitha. Give them up, tyag karo, tyaktena tyag karo. Give them up, renounce them. Bhunjitha, bhog karo, enjoy karo. अब दोनों कैसे हो सकते हैं? छोड़ भी दो और भोग भी करो. Real enjoyment comes only if you give them up mentally, internally. So this renunciation is inner. You are not attached to these things. You realize very well that they cannot be a source of lasting happiness, and therefore you are not longing for them. Your mind is not preoccupied with them, and that can happen only if now your attachment is something higher. You can give up something lower, which feels good, only if you develop an attachment to something higher, which feels even better. So that is the process. And if you are on that path, seeking something higher, your goal is now set higher, that is what you are attached to, not the ordinary pleasures of the body and the mind, then it is possible to give up all seeking for comfort, satisfaction, enjoyment, or happiness. And this giving up all this seeking has to be personal, for yourself. You can wish it for others. Then the third piece of advice. Take pleasure in all you do, but never do anything for the sake of pleasure. Again, here one may add within parenthesis, which is understood. Take pleasure in all you do, but never do anything for the sake of your own pleasure. Which means in what you do, you can still do it because somebody else will be happy. That you can still do. So take pleasure in all you do. How can we do that? By realizing that the work that I am doing right now, the work that I have been given, the circumstances in which I have been placed, which are making that work necessary, have been given to me because I have been chosen as an instrument by the divine. The divine has no shortage of instruments. Yet I have been chosen because I am dear to the divine. The way, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, you are dear to me, therefore I have chosen you as the instrument to fight this battle. So, the divine is neither short of instruments, nor is it in a hurry to get the work done. So, if the divine has chosen me as an instrument for doing something, then it is a privilege, and therefore I will be able to take pleasure in it. So, take pleasure in all you do. But never do anything for the sake of pleasure. Don't do it just because it will make me happy. And this is something which we start doing in an absolute way during while we are on the spiritual path quite early. I'll give you my own example. For example, soon after I moved to the ashram, which was about 15 years ago, if anybody would come to invite me for, say, a marriage or some other ceremony, or maybe some girl is having her Arangetram, her first public performance of Bharatnatyam, or any of these things, I would say, these things don't give me pleasure anymore. If I had to attend all these functions, why would I move to the ashram? I will not come. Naturally, they will not force me. They'll also understand these people are like that. These people who move to ashrams and all, they are queer people. And their function will still take place even if I don't go. It will still go on. But on the whole, they'll still not be too happy about it. But then they can understand in a vague way that these people give up all these worldly ties and pleasures. Now I don't do that anymore all the time. If I feel that this person is inviting with genuine love, and he or she will get a bit of happiness, and I will not lose much. Not only I will not lose much, even this visit to this function, maybe for even a short time, depending upon what type of function it is, one can go only for 15 minutes. One may not eat. One may arrive late because most other people will be late, so you don't want to go and wait there too early. So you can do all that. But even if you go there for 15 minutes, and that gives a bit of happiness to the person who invited you, there's no harm. And how you can use it for, again, your own spiritual growth, even over there, see the divine in everybody. See the divine in all those who have come for the function. They may not understand you. You should be able to understand them because you're looking at things from a higher plane. If they are enjoying it, grant that happiness to them. What may not be a source of great happiness to you, if it is a source of happiness to them, so be it. Accept that also as a play of the divine. And one of my teachers, what he used to do was when he was invited for a wedding, and I can see in retrospect maybe why he did that, he would come quite late. He will not wait for food. He'll stay only 15 minutes and go away. And if you tell him, press him that khana kha ke jana, have your dinner and then go, he'll say, I'm on fast today. So, easy getting away. Then you will not force him, I'm on fast. I don't know how he was always on a fast whenever he was invited anywhere. Those are little harmless lies. Because you see, you are doing it not so that the other person's happiness is not disturbed. So, always speak the truth is something which occurs in all ethical codes. But then all ethical codes have limited validity. There are always exceptions. And for this, I always give one example, which although I may run out of time, I'll still give. Once there was a gunman who entered an elementary school in the US, in the state of Connecticut. He found a large number, and this gunman entered, went about shooting a large number of children and teachers. And in one of the classrooms, when the teacher heard the commotion, she told those little children, they were very small children in her class, she told them to sit in a cupboard in the classroom. She told them, you can sit here quietly. When this man is gone, I'll take you out. As soon after she had deposited the children in the cupboards and closed the doors, the gunman entered this very room. He asked her, where are the children? She says, they have gone to the gym. He shot her dead and moved to the next room. Later on, the children were discovered there. The teacher did a wonderful job. She saved the children and also sacrificed her life. But then what did she do just before dying? She told a lie. She didn't say the children are in the cupboard. That would have been the truth. But she didn't speak the truth. Who told her not to speak the truth? That psychic being. So the psychic being gives us the true situation-specific guidance in a split second. The mind, on the other hand, may give us a wrong choice even after a laborious analysis which goes on for hours. That is the difference between this. Because the divine knows all. The one who knows all does not require that laborious analysis to arrive at what is right and wrong. It gives you that in a split second, and that's how immediately she knew what to say. And which excuse to make? They've gone to the gym. That probably came from that higher force. At once she knew something else to say. So, this little lie, I'm on a fast or whatever, these are okay. So take pleasure in all you do, but never do anything for the sake of your pleasure. So if this person goes for the same function because he thinks that it will make me happy, then it has a different connotation than if he goes because he thinks that let me go, it will make somebody else happy. I'll just give you one example, but it applies to across the board. This is a very general piece of advice. Take pleasure in all you do, but never do anything just for the sake of your own pleasure. Fourth piece of advice. Never get excited, nervous, or agitated. 3 words. To avoid each one of them, it's a monumentous task. Even to avoid one of them is so difficult. Not to get agitated, not to get nervous, not to get excited. And of course, all these things go also with anger to some extent, with a sense of insecurity to some extent. So how can we avoid all these things which are manifestations of that anger, insecurity, mental confusion, all these manifest as excitement, nervousness, agitation. How can it be that it never happens? Again, when you are in contact with that higher force. Which means that all this advice is geared at trying to make you go near that higher source, that higher force, which only will be able to make us free from all these ordinary disturbances of the mind. So never get excited, nervous, or agitated. So if as a resolution we have decided it, at least we may succeed 10% of the time. So one can remember this advice, that nothing warrants the type of anger or confusion that we have. If we go to that deeper self, that confusion will be resolved. The anger will get replaced by forgiveness because you will see the divine in the one with whom you are angry. The sense of insecurity will disappear because you will know that I have with me that higher force which loves me, which knows what is best for me, and therefore, what is there to feel insecure about? Whatever happens will be the best. So, never get excited, nervous, or agitated. 5th piece of advice. Never complain of the behavior of anyone unless you have the power to change in his nature what makes him act thus. And if you have the power, change him instead of complaining. Again, very carefully worded. Never complain of the behavior of anyone. Never. So like in the previous one, again never. Never get excited, nervous. Never complain of the behavior of anyone. And yet we do it so often. But then, when are we entitled to do it? To complain of the behavior of someone? If you have the power to change in his nature what makes him act thus. Again, very careful, in his nature. Which means there is something in his nature, his swabhava, the way he habitually behaves, which makes him behave like that. If you can change that in his nature, which in other words means if you can change his level of consciousness so that his nature will change and he will not behave in this way. If you can do that, then you are entitled to complain about it, not otherwise. And if you have that power, if you can do it, then do it instead of complaining. Why not do the constructive thing? Now, she's not saying that do not complain of the behavior if you can stop him from behaving that way. If you can change in his nature what makes him behave like this. Why? Because suppose you are the boss and you don't like something in one of your subordinates. You can stop him from doing that. Say, take a simple thing, he comes late every day. Or he gossips a lot in the office with the colleagues. If you tell him don't gossip, come on time, he may stop gossiping, he may come on time. But then you have only changed his behavior. You have not changed in his nature what makes him act thus. Okay? So there's a difference between stopping him from doing it and changing something in his nature. So this is the other piece of advice. Then she goes on to advice which is even more specific, more personal, which we can, in a way, more easily implement. And that is, before you eat, what to do. Of course, we all know before we eat, we should pray. We should pray for the food that we have with gratitude. Thank God for the food that we have. That is very good. But then she says something else. What type of a prayer it should be? The prayer should be that let this food provide the solid basis for my actions, which means it should strengthen my body, nourish my body. My body has to be maintained. This solid frame is necessary for action in the world. It provides the material base. Let it be strengthened. And then it gives us energy. Let me give the energy which is required for the persistence and perseverance which is required on the spiritual path. So pray for that. Which means that you're looking at what the effect of the food will be, what the food will be converted into the body. It will be converted into my body tissues, growth, repair of wear and tear, as we call in modern science, That is what the food will do. So that is necessary because that is the basis. So it should be able to do that properly. Take that food which will do it most effectively and in the best possible way without any harmful effects on the body, which will on one hand help maybe build up a bit of my body, but then also make me sick. Not that type of food. Then the second function of food we say in science is to provide energy. Energy for what? So energy for the long journey. It requires perseverance and patience. It should give me energy for that. So think in terms of the impact of the food on my body and mind, the consequences that I expect from it, what I expect the material consequences and the energy releasing consequences of the food to be in my body. Think of both of those and then eat. So before you eat, do this. This can be a part of the prayer before eating. Then before you sleep, what to do? In the same way, our body is so constituted that it requires periodic rest. 6 to 8 hours is the average requirement of sleep. So unless we do that, we will not feel rejuvenated and restored the next day. The next day we will not be able to work properly. So since my body is so constituted for good reasons, modern science is also discovering more and more functions of sleep than just rest. It is more than just rest. So before you sleep, again, the prayer should include, we all know that we should pray when we sleep, but one of those prayers should be that let me sleep so that my batteries get recharged overnight, like the battery of a computer or a phone that also needs recharging. So my batteries also need recharging, and that will happen during sleep. So please help me recharge my batteries overnight so that tomorrow again I am restored, rejuvenated, fit to do what I am here in the world for, to address that goal of life. So never forget the goal that the mother keeps repeating while giving this piece of advice, that all this is keeping that goal in mind, discovering your divine essence. So before you sleep, you do this. So one of the components of that prayer at sleep time. What can be the other components at sleep time? The other component can be review of the day. What is it that I did throughout the day which I can be proud of? What is it that I can be ashamed of? Use that inner churning for doing better the next day and the day after that and in future. So that can be another component of that bedtime prayer. And yet another component of that prayer can be to get rid of stress. Because for the sleep to be effective in restoring us, rejuvenating us overnight, the sleep should be restful and peaceful. And that doesn't happen quite often because of the various stresses that we have in life. But then nothing really changes overnight, and therefore the stress will remain exactly the same when we get up in the morning. But then what can happen overnight is that we can seek the comfort of the one for whom everything is easy, who will show us the path the next day, how to take care of this stress, what to do about this stress. So leave it to the one who will show us the path the next day, and overnight, just forget about everything. The next day the mother will show the path. And don't treat the pillow as a pillow. Treat the pillow as the mother's lap. When a child is in its mother's lap, the child has no worry. She'll take care of everything. So just be a child. That's one of the simple pieces of advice in our yoga Nolinida gave. Be a child. Be a child of the mother. So just behave like that child, and not only behave like that child, in fact, you are the child. It's only we have to realize that we are the child. It is along the same lines, as one of the speakers in a recent satsang said, that we all keep praying, "Oh God, make me your instrument." It's much later that we realize that I was always an instrument. So I didn't have to pray to be made an instrument. It's because of my ignorance that I thought I had to pray for being made an instrument. I was always an instrument throughout my life. I was being made to do whatever I was doing. So in the same way, we are always children of the mother. It's only that we discover sometime later in life and we start saying, "Mother, please accept me as your child." Then on the pillow we say, "Mother, this is your lap. Please take care of me overnight." She's always there. So treat the pillow as the mother's lap. Leave everything to her. Tomorrow she'll show what is to be done. So these are some of the components of the prayer, but here particularly what the mother has emphasized in this piece of advice is that pray that overnight I should be restored so that my fatigue is gone, my tiredness is gone. Tomorrow I should get up fresh and be able to do what I am expected to do as a part of my sadhana, which in turn will take me towards the goal of life, which is discovery of this divine essence. So that I can organize my life around it. It is no longer a mental belief for me. It becomes something that I have realized. It has become my inner truth. Next piece of advice, before you act, before you do anything, look at it. Will it help in any way my spiritual progress? Or will it raise my level of consciousness? These are different ways of looking at it. In very simple terms, which may be more or less okay, will it make me a better person? So look at it that way. And she says that if it will contribute to your spiritual progress, go ahead and do it. If it will do nothing, neither help nor hinder, even then you may do it, because there will be certain such things to be done. But if it will hinder spiritual progress, don't do it. It may not help you take one step towards the goal, but at least not make you take one step away from the goal. So before you act, think what the consequences of the action will be. Will they be in terms of raising my consciousness, keeping it the same or lowering it? If it will raise the consciousness or keep it the same, go ahead, act. If it will lower it, don't do it. Then before you speak, here she gives two cautions. One is it really necessary? Speak only as much as is necessary. This is something the mother has emphasized elsewhere also while talking about the austerities. She says that to talk only as much as is necessary is more difficult than to stay totally silent for a fixed period of time. People observe Maun Vrat for a whole day sometimes. Today is my Maun Vrat, I will not speak. Even that is easier than speaking only as much as is necessary all the time. So speak only if it is necessary. Secondly, in keeping with this goal, do not say anything which will hurt your progress. Because speaking is also an act. It's a specific type of act. So as in case of actions, don't do it if it will hinder your progress, it will block your progress, it will take you one step backwards. In the same way, don't speak those words which will hinder the progress or make you take one step backwards. Then if that is what will be the consequence of these words, don't speak them. So in all these, she says before. Before you eat, before you sleep, before you act, before you speak. What happens if we are unable to do it before? Can we do it after? Yes, after also, at least if we remember that this is what I should have done but I didn't do, even then it is helpful. Because you see, to be able to do it always before is also a long journey. When we will remember it after having done it, and the next stage where we will remember it before we have actually done it is itself a long journey. And even remembering it after you have done it helps in moving towards that stage where you will now start remembering it before you have done it. Okay. So important is do it before, but even if you remember it afterwards, do try to think about it and resolve next time I'll try to do it before. So before you eat, before you sleep, before you act, before you sleep. And then comes the 10th piece of advice, which is from elsewhere. That is from Words of Long Ago, which is a compilation of the talks and writings of the mother before she came to Pondicherry, even for the first time in 1914. That's why they are called Words of Long Ago. In that, on page 51, you'll find a talk which the mother gave almost to the day, exactly 90 years ago, in May 110 years ago. May 1912, she gave that talk. 110 years ago, almost to the day. In that, she gives a very wonderful piece of advice, which in a way is the simplest of all, and yet, again, very difficult to act upon. What is that? Devote some time each day to some impersonal action, something that will be useful to others. So just one little thing. Devote some time to it. Find some time to do something which is not for your own personal interest, which will help somebody else. Which will not help you in any way at all, and yet do it because it will help somebody else. Sometimes it may be just 2 minutes that action takes, sometimes it may be 2 hours that it takes, but if you have an opportunity to do it, do it. Which means we should be vigilant. Look for those opportunities when you can do something which may not help you in any way, but will help somebody else. And this can be again one of the things which one can think of while sleeping. Before one sleeps, reviewing the day, did I do anything today which would help somebody else, which was completely impersonal, completely irrespective of what it will give me? Did I do any such thing? Very often you will find I didn't do even one such thing throughout the day. Then what do we say? Okay, mother, sorry, tomorrow I'll try to do 2 such things. If we keep doing that, ultimately, may sometimes become 3, sometimes become 4, but then sooner or later we'll remember, we'll become more and more vigilant, and when the opportunity comes, we'll not miss it. Vigilance is one of the important things in sadhana. And vigilance is both positive and negative. Negative vigilance is that if we are tempted to do something which we should not be doing, we should not do it. We should be vigilant about it. Before we do it, we should remember not to do it. Positive vigilance is if we have an opportunity to do something good, we should not miss it. It may not seem to have any legal or moral implications, but yet it has implications in terms of our consciousness. It has implications in terms of the spiritual progress that we make. So that is positive vigilance, not to lose an opportunity, do something that will raise our consciousness, and it will invariably be something such which is irrespective of anything, any personal, material gain or loss. Material, what I am saying is because it will raise our consciousness. So in a way, still a personal interest is involved. But that degree of personal interest is permissible. Okay. If I do it and it raises my consciousness, without thinking that it will raise my consciousness, it's okay. Because again, if we keep thinking about the spiritual progress, if we keep thinking about the goal, it doesn't come any closer, it outdistances us. So we just do what we have to do. The progress and reaching the goal will take care of itself. That is the dictum. The mother takes care of that. So these 10 pieces of advice, very simple, each of them. Something like the 10 commandments, but not in the tone of commandments, don't do this and don't do that. But these can be, in a way, our 10 commandments on the path of spirituality, on the path of integral yoga. And this type of things I thought are important for us, because one of the common complaints and questions is that integral yoga is about all life. Bring yoga into all your life. How can we do it? Nobody tells us clearly what exactly is to be done. It is not the type of yoga in which somebody will tell us, do asanas for 1 hour and meditate for half an hour, and your yoga is done. It is not that type of yoga. Then what is it that we are supposed to do in this yoga? On one hand, it is not a 1.5 hour yoga. On the other hand, you are saying it's a 24-hour yoga and not telling us exactly what is to be done. Now, here again, it's not exactly what is to be done. Within what we are doing, the type of life that we have, within the circumstances that we have, all these 10 commandments can apply. So which means that the person can still carve out her own path, without being told in cookbook fashion, do this and don't do this. And yet, its advice is very concrete, it is very simple, and takes a lot of work to act upon, but that unless we are willing to put in that type of difficult work, how can we progress? If we want something big, we have to be prepared for doing something, and especially what is the problem in doing it? When it is prolonged work, it is hard work, but it is primarily inner work. We have to work on ourselves, and we can always work on ourselves. We can't change anybody else, but we can always change ourselves. We have to work on ourselves, and much before we reach the goal, we start feeling much happier and healthier. So it's not that till then we just have to remain serious and glum and dukhi. अभी तक goal पहुँचे ही नहीं. We have not yet reached the goal. अब क्या होगा? कब पहुँचेंगे? कुछ सोचने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Just enjoy the journey and forget about the destination. So I thought this wonderful day on which we have this wonderful audience probably can be spent in one way by talking about these simple things which can form the core of sadhana in integral yoga. Because after all, it is all life, as Sri Aurobindo says, all life is yoga. All life is an opportunity for the practice of yoga. It is an opportunity, but to use the opportunity or miss it still is up to us. And what better way than this advice, particularly the last bits, what to do before eating, what to do before sleeping, what to do before acting, what to do before speaking, and finding one impersonal thing to do. Now, this is what all life is about. What are we doing throughout the day? We are eating, sleeping, acting, speaking, eating, sleeping, acting, speaking, and if within that we also build in something impersonal, it becomes all life, because that is what we do throughout the day. And night. Sleep includes night. So it becomes truly a 24-hour yoga, just with this bit of advice: what to do before eating, what to do before sleeping, what to do before acting, what to do before speaking, and keep in mind to do something impersonal every day.